in the queue, but we do have Warp Sonic, who's got a really good question for us about vigilantism. So I'm going to pull him up. And Warp, you are on the line. How would you like to talk about vigilantism?
Hi. So my question was kind of vigilantism as it relates to standard of evidence, I guess. So I guess I'll give like a hypothetical. This is the hypothetical I came up with when I was thinking about how to ask this was, uh, let's say it's the 90s and I am the only close relative of OJ Simpson's wife. And OJ, give with how that trial went, it was found that the evidence was insufficient to convict him. But um, people generally think, yeah, he probably did it. And so then my question is like, in that case, if I go out on my own and I kill OJ Simpson and then I get taken to court and I say, well, he was probably a murderer, then the standard of evidence would seem like, well, if he was a murderer, then I didn't do anything wrong and he was probably a murderer. So does that mean that I am uh, does that mean that the evidence of whether or not I am guilty is dependent on whether or not it can be proven that OJ Simpson wasn't a murderer, or is it because there wasn't enough evidence for that I don't get to, get away with just killing him in revenge or whatever?
So I would say that the standards of evidence aren't actually any different for vigilantes than for anybody else. Now, yeah, I think I can say that he's dead now, right? Yeah, he absolutely did it. He is a murderer. This is just a factual claim. Every piece of evidence points to the fact that O.J. Simpson is a murderer. So yeah, on that, you'd be allowed to punish him for that crime. I'll say it in that way. And he was even found on the balance probabilities, I believe the standard is for the civil courts, to have done it. So he got sued. And the court did indeed find that it's almost certainly the case that he did do it. But the jury explicitly, the jury said that they just wanted a win after Trayvon Martin, I believe it was. So they just voted him not guilty because he was black. Like, this is explicitly, they were interviewed after the fact, and they were like, yeah, that was the sentiment in that jury, that the black people needed a win after Trayvon Martin. So like, yeah, he's absolutely guilty, and that's all that really matters. It doesn't matter whether the state recognizes that he's guilty or not.
Right. So at that case, I guess the question is still like, I think you mentioned this, that you think that like the standard of evidence for vigilantism would be the same as for like a formalized court, where so like if you did something and the and people rule that your evidence of this, that of this person doing something punishable wasn't good enough, then it's essentially uh you'd be personally guilty.
Yeah, if you punish somebody unduly, then yeah, you would be guilty of that.
I don't want to speak at a turn here. I had to pay attention for a moment to make sure that we got our next caller into the chat, and I'm glad to say that he is here. But I want to offer this in the event that it's useful, and I just want to say that forensics as a area of study, which is the whole topic of how to properly establish that some incident happened a certain way, is separate entirely from the theory that we have about property rights. So there's a firm line, and on one side there's the question of, like, in reality, person A either did or did not do a property rights violation, and whatever, like you're talking about vigilantism, Zulu was talking about, he can be punished. Then that's an entirely factual, just that's out there. And then forensics is like this separate process we have to go through within our limited, human beings are subject to uncertainty, imperfect knowledge, all these kinds of things. And in the context of those limitations, we have to come up with a way to determine, did that happen? And that's a separate entire process. And I'd even say it's a separate topic in a sense. It is objectively either the case that it happened a certain way. And then, so one way you could look at it is ask a hypothetical such that we assert all of the different characteristics of the situation, and then we can evaluate that with theory and say, okay, that did or did not constitute a property rights violation. Separate from that entirely is, let's say that the people who asked that question, they're in a separate universe and they're observers, and there's no way for them to communicate. And now inside the universe, there's normal people like us. Now we have to use this forensic science to try and figure out, okay, are we justified acting as if this happened one way or the other way? And we have to make that decision ultimately, never having perfect knowledge. I mean, I used to say a while ago, when I was younger, I'd use an example of like, well, we can get really close because, maybe you've got like videotapes of someone committing a crime, and that's pretty strong evidence. And even that with AI now isn't as strong evidence as it used to be. So I hope that is a useful insight to sort of like the different approaches we have to take to answer a question like that.
Yeah, I guess, and I'm like, I am an ANCAP, so like I take, y'all's side, but I guess the question to me is like, with decentralized courts, if they adopt some kind of like, if there's any kind of variance in standard of evidence, could they basically condemn each other for rulings that, if they have different standards of evidence, how would they deal with any sort of deviation in that fields between different I guess these decentralized judicial agencies?
So, dealing with differences between different judicial agencies, that's certainly an interesting problem. But I will say, in the first case, it doesn't actually matter for the legal theory, right? The legal theory can be correct, and different people can try to be applying it in different ways and be wrong, right? So certainly, but it is important for us, right? If we want to actually have this theory realized and be existential in a way, then we definitely want people to be under some agreement there. Now, I think that you would tend to not get really absurd rulings too often, because if you have like some sort of an absurd ruling, well, if we're assuming that this is an anarcho-capitalist world, well, then people already must be convinced of our objective legal theory, right? So who is going for and patronizing these courts with absurd rulings, right? And that's why I'm so heavy on how it's all about the philosophy of the day. If we convince a critical mass of the population of our legal theory, then that just is going to be realized, right? That's the fundamental thing there. It's not about how do we carefully orchestrate it and make sure that the market is exactly matching up to that. That's all downstream. We don't have to really worry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I am more so less defeatist about it, like, oh, this is like a fatal blow to the theory, as much as I'm like, I want to learn more and theorize more on how can we like, this is a solvable problem, right? So I'm like, how should this work, and also how could that like come about naturally?
Yeah.
So
Well, I feel like that's a holistic treatment of the question that was originally posed. Anyhow, I like this topic a lot, actually, and I think we could afford to get into it, but we're a little bit over time, so we better get to our last caller. Please call in again next week or ask a question in text if nothing else, and let us continue chatting with you next time about this topic.
Okay. Yeah, I'll think about it if I have any more questions. Thanks.
Sweet. Perfect. Thanks so much. All right.